Hello everyone. In today's video, I bring you an impressive story that will leave you breathless. We're going to meet Rowena Keats, a teacher who had a near-death experience after being struck by lightning, and what she saw on the other side will completely change your perception of humanity's future. She received a divine warning and an urgent message about a global financial collapse that may be about to happen. Her account is surprising and full of impactful revelations you can't miss. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any incredible content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for this intense and transformative spiritual journey. My name is Rowena Keats, and I'm here to share with you an experience that completely changed my life and my perception of the world. It all began on a summer afternoon in 2005, in Phoenix, Arizona. I was an ordinary woman, living a quiet life without major upheavals. At the time, I worked as a literature teacher at a local school and lived alone in a simple house in the suburbs of the city. I had never been a particularly religious or spiritual person. I believed in God, but in a distant and abstract way. The idea of life after death or supernatural experiences had never been more than mere curiosity to me. I was a practical person, with my feet firmly planted on the ground. Or at least, that's what I thought. That summer afternoon, the sky was heavy with dark clouds, signaling one of Arizona's famous monsoon storms. I had always been fascinated by storms, so I decided to sit on the steps of my porch to watch nature's spectacle. The air was thick and electric, and I could feel the anticipation of the rain on my skin. As I watched the lightning split the sky, I felt a strange sense of peace and connection with the world around me. Little did I know, those moments would be the last of my life as I knew it. Suddenly, a blinding flash filled my vision. It was so fast that I had no time to react. A lightning bolt, attracted by some whim of fate, struck directly where I was sitting. In the next moment, I felt excruciating pain coursing through my entire body, as if every cell was being set on fire from the inside out. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the pain stopped. Silence took over everything. I found myself floating above my own body, which lay still on the steps of the porch. At that moment, I didn't fully understand what was happening, but something inside me knew that I had died. Looking down at my lifeless body, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. There was fear and confusion, of course, but also a surprising sense of calm and acceptance. It was as if I was watching a scene from a movie, something distant and unreal. It was then that I realized my journey was just beginning. What I would experience in the moments to come would forever change my understanding of life, death, and everything that exists between those two states. This is the story of my near-death experience, an account of what I saw, felt, and learned during my brief passage to the other side. It's a story of transformation, revelation, and above all, hope. Floating above my body, I experienced an indescribable sensation of lightness and freedom. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders, a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying. I looked at my hands and realized I could see through them. I no longer had a physical body, yet I still retained a recognizable form. At first, I was scared. How could I be here looking at my own body lying on the ground? I tried to shout for help, but no sound came out. I tried to touch my body, but my hands simply passed through it. It was at this moment that the reality of the situation began to sink in. I had left my physical body. I observed the scene around me with surprising clarity. I could see every detail of my house, the trees in the yard, even the raindrops starting to fall, with a sharpness I had never experienced before. The colors seemed more vibrant, the sounds crisper, even though everything was strangely silent. I tried to calm myself and understand what was happening. I remembered reading about near-death experiences, but I had never imagined I would go through one. Was this it? Was I really dead? Or was it just a very vivid dream? As these questions swirled in my mind, I noticed I no longer felt pain, fear, or anxiety. All the worries and problems that plagued me in life seemed insignificant now. It was as if I had left behind not just my physical body, but also all the emotional burdens I carried. I looked again at my body on the ground. It seemed so fragile and vulnerable. I felt a wave of compassion for that physical form that had served me for so many years. I realized I had never truly appreciated my body, always focusing on its imperfections. Now, seeing it from the outside, I understood its beauty and complexity. I tried to move and discovered that I could do so with just a thought. There were no physical limitations. I could float, spin, even pass through walls. It was a feeling of absolute freedom, something I had never experienced in life. As I explored this new form of existence, I noticed a soft light beginning to form around me. It wasn't a blinding or frightening light, but rather a welcoming and comforting one. I felt drawn to it, as if it were gently calling me. That's when I realized I was about to embark on a journey. I didn't know where I was going, but I felt it was something important, something I needed to experience. I cast one last look at my body and the life I was leaving behind. I felt gratitude for everything I had lived through, but also a strange excitement for what was to come. As I let myself be carried by the light, I understood that I was at the threshold between two worlds. The physical world I knew was fading away, and a new realm of existence was opening up before me. I didn't know what awaited me, but I was ready to find out. Driven by an irresistible curiosity, I decided to enter my house. However, as I crossed the door, I realized that something was deeply different. The house I knew so well had transformed into something completely new and surreal. All the furniture, the walls, even the air around me, were bathed in an ethereal golden mist. It was as if every object was emanating its own soft light. The colors were more intense than I had ever seen, with shades I didn't even know existed. The living room sofa, once a simple brown, now seemed to pulse with tones of amber and bronze. I walked through the rooms, amazed by the transformation. The curtains swayed gently, though there was no wind. The pictures on the walls seemed alive, the images moving subtly as if they were breathing. Every step I took sent waves of light across the floor, as if I were walking on the surface of a golden lake. The strangest part was the sound. Though there was no electricity, I could feel that somehow. I heard the distant sound of an old radio playing a melody I didn't recognize. The music seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing through the house with an ethereal quality. I tried to touch the objects around me, but my hands passed through them as if they were made of smoke. However, I could feel an energy emanating from them, a soft vibration that resonated with my own non-physical existence. It was at this moment that the reality of my situation truly hit me. I was no longer in the physical world I knew. Somehow I had transitioned to another reality, a plane of existence that coexisted with the material world, but was fundamentally different. At first, I felt a wave of panic. What was happening? Where exactly was I? Could this be the afterlife that so many religions and philosophies tried to describe? Or was it just a hallucination created by my dying brain? As these questions swirled in my mind, I noticed something even stranger. My thoughts seemed to have power in this new environment. When I thought of my mother, who had passed away years ago, I saw a brief flash of her face reflected in a nearby mirror. When I focused on the idea of peace, the light around me became softer and more comforting. I then understood that I was in a place where thoughts and emotions had a direct impact on the environment. It was a realm where the inner and outer worlds merged, where reality was shaped by consciousness. As I continued to explore the house, I began to feel less afraid and more fascinated. Each room revealed new wonders, things that challenged my understanding of what was possible. I saw memories of my life reflected on the walls like silent films. I heard echoes of past conversations, laughter from happy moments, whispers of long-forgotten secrets. I realized that this transformed version of my house was a kind of bridge between the world I knew and what was to come. It was a space of transition, a place where I could say goodbye to the familiar while preparing for the unknown. As I absorbed all of this, I felt a presence approaching. It wasn't something I could see or hear, but rather something I sensed in the deepest part of my being. It was a vast, loving, and incomprehensible presence, and I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that my journey was just beginning. As I explored the ethereal version of my house, I felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The golden light that surrounded everything around me began to pulse more intensely, as if responding to a silent call. It was then that I realized I was no longer alone. An immense and indescribable presence began to manifest around me. It wasn't something I could see with my eyes or touch with my hands, but something I felt with every fiber of my being. It was as if the universe itself had condensed into a conscious entity and was now enveloping me in a cosmic embrace. At first, I was scared. The magnitude of this presence was overwhelming, beyond anything I could comprehend. But then, I was flooded by a wave of love so pure and unconditional that all my worries and fears simply dissolved. This love was unlike anything I had ever experienced in life. It wasn't romantic love, nor familial love, nor even the love for humanity that we sometimes feel in our most altruistic moments. It was a love that transcended all these forms, a love that seemed to be the very essence of the universe. In that cosmic embrace, I felt completely accepted and understood. Every aspect of my life, every choice I had made, every thought I had ever had, everything was exposed and loved unconditionally. There was no judgment, only total and complete acceptance. I tried to communicate with this presence, to ask questions, to understand what was happening. But words felt inadequate and unnecessary. The communication happened on a deeper level, through feelings, impressions, and instant understandings. Then, without warning, I began to move. Or perhaps it was the world around me that was moving. It was hard to tell. I was enveloped by clouds of indescribable colors, predominantly gold and pink, but with hues I had never seen before and for which I had no name. As I floated through these clouds of color, I experienced a sense of movement and expansion. It was as if I were traveling through time and space, or perhaps beyond them. Glimpses of other worlds, other realities passed by me in a kaleidoscope of images and sensations. All the while, the loving presence remained with me, gently guiding me through this cosmic journey. I felt protected and supported, knowing that no matter what happened, I was safe in this universal embrace. Gradually, the movement began to slow down. The clouds of color dissipated, and I found myself arriving at a new place. It was a garden of indescribable beauty, with colors so vibrant and alive that they made the colors of the physical world seem pale in comparison. As I gently touched down in this celestial garden, the loving presence that had accompanied me began to withdraw. I felt a twinge of sadness, but also a deep gratitude for the experience I had just lived. I knew that, in some way, that encounter had fundamentally transformed me. I looked around, marveling at the beauty of the garden. Flowers of impossible shapes and colors swayed in a breeze I couldn't feel. Majestic trees reached up to a sky so deeply blue it seemed almost tangible. And in the distance, I saw two figures approaching. At that moment, I understood that my journey was far from over. The encounter with the loving presence had been only the beginning. Now new revelations and encounters awaited me in this celestial garden. As I watched the two figures approach in the celestial garden, I felt a mix of curiosity and anticipation. As they came closer, I could distinguish that they were two men dressed in white linen robes, so bright they almost blinded my vision. Their faces radiated a serenity and peace I had never seen before. When they finally stood before me, I was overwhelmed by a wave of recognition so strong that it almost unbalanced me. Without anyone needing to tell me, I knew exactly who they were. Tobias and Eli, my brothers who had died as babies, long before I was born. At first I was confused. How could I recognize brothers I had never known in life? How could I know their names? But in that place, in that state of existence, knowledge seemed to come in a different way. It wasn't something I needed to remember or learn. It was something I simply knew. As if this information had always been inside me, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Tobias, the elder, smiled at me with a love so deep that I felt my entire being vibrate in response. Eli, the younger, reached out and touched my face with indescribable tenderness. In that touch, I felt the entire history of our family, all the joys and sorrows, all the bonds that united us beyond time and space. "Welcome, sister," Tobias said, his voice sounding like celestial music. "We've been waiting for this moment for a long time." Eli nodded, his eyes shining with a wisdom that seemed impossible for someone who had left the earth so young. "We have much to show you, Rowena," he said. I was speechless. How could I explain to them that I didn't truly belong in this place, that my presence here was an accident, the result of a capricious lightning strike? But before I could express these doubts, Tobias spoke again. "There are no accidents here, sister. Every moment, every encounter, has a purpose." His words calmed me, and I felt a profound sense of belonging. It was as if a part of me that I hadn't known was missing had finally found its place. Together, we began walking through the celestial garden. Each step revealed new wonders, flowers that sang softly as we passed by, trees whose leaves glowed with their own light, streams of crystal clear water that flowed in impossible patterns, defying gravity. As we walked, Tobias and Eli told me about their lives on the other side. They spoke of peace, constant learning, spiritual growth. They spoke about how they watched over our family on earth, how they celebrated our joys and shared our sorrows. "But how?" I asked, still struggling to understand. "How can you know so much about us if you left so young?" Eli smiled gently. "Time here doesn't work the same way it does on earth, sister. We aren't limited by the linearity you experience. We can see the past, the present, and the possibilities of the future, all at once." This revelation stunned me. The idea that my brothers, whom I had always imagined as eternal babies, were actually beings of great wisdom and knowledge was both comforting and disconcerting. As we continued our walk, I felt a deeper and deeper connection with Tobias and Eli. It was as if all the time and distance that had separated us in earthly life simply no longer existed. We were a family reunited, bound by ties that transcended human understanding. We reached a beautiful lake with calm, crystal-clear waters. Tobias and Eli stopped, and their faces grew serious. "Rowena," Tobias said, "there is something we need to show you, something important that you need to see and understand." I looked at the mirror-like surface of the lake, unsure of what to expect. Little did I know, I was about to receive a vision that would forever change my understanding of the world and the future of humanity. As I stared into the lake's crystal-clear waters, I felt a subtle shift in the air around me. The peaceful atmosphere of the celestial garden gave way to a palpable tension. Tobias and Eli stood by my side, their faces now serious and contemplative. "Watch closely, sister," Eli said softly. "What you are about to see is crucial." Suddenly, the lake's surface began to ripple, like a giant screen preparing for a projection. The waters calmed again, but now they reflected images that did not belong to that paradise. The first scene took my breath away. It was a vision of Wall Street, the financial heart of the world, but not as I knew it. The towering skyscrapers were darkened, the streets deserted. Electronic boards flickered furiously, showing dramatic drops in global markets. I saw desperate people crying on the sidewalks, clutching what I imagined were now worthless stocks. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "A possible future," Tobias replied. "A global financial collapse that could happen if humanity continues on its current path." Before I could fully process this information, the image changed. Now I saw devastated battlefields, cities in ruins, refugees fleeing en masse. Wars on a scale I had never imagined were occurring simultaneously across multiple continents. These conflicts, Eli explained, are the direct result of resource shortages, climate change, and growing inequality between nations. My heart ached at the sight of so much suffering, so much destruction. But the visions didn't stop there. The lake's surface continued to show scene after scene of devastation, wildfires consuming entire continents, floods swallowing coastal cities, hurricanes of unprecedented intensity sweeping everything in their path. Natural disasters, Tobias said, his voice heavy with sadness, are the Earth's response to the constant abuse it has suffered at the hands of humanity. As I watched these terrible scenes unfold, I noticed something strange. The images seemed to move faster and faster, as if time itself was accelerating. "What's happening?" I asked, confused. "Why is everything moving so quickly?" Eli placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "What you are seeing, Rowena, is the acceleration of time. Events that would normally take decades or even centuries to unfold are happening at an increasingly rapid pace." I was horrified by this revelation. If these catastrophic events would already be terrible over an extended period, the idea that they could happen in quick succession was almost unbearable to contemplate. "But why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why is this happening? Why does the future look so dark?" Tobias and Eli exchanged a significant glance before Tobias answered, "What you are seeing, Sister Aoi, is the direct result of humanity's choices. Unchecked greed, selfishness, disregard for the planet and other living beings. All of this is leading to a point of no return." A wave of despair washed over me. How could we avoid such a terrible future? It seemed impossible to change the course of events so catastrophic. But then, in the midst of the chaos and destruction reflected on the lake's surface, I saw something that gave me a spark of hope. It was an image of people coming together, helping one another in the face of adversity. I saw communities rebuilding, technological innovations being used to restore the environment, and leaders from different nations coming together in a joint effort to save the planet. I looked at Tobias and Eli, a silent question in my eyes. Eli smiled softly. "Yes, sister, there is hope. The future is not set in stone. What you saw are possibilities, not certainties." "But how?" I asked, my voice filled with emotion. "How can we avoid this terrible future?" It was then that Tobias and Eli began to explain to me the warning I was to bring back to the world of the living. A message of hope, but also of urgency, that would forever change my mission in life. Tobias and Eli guided me away from the lake, their expressions serious but compassionate. We arrived at a circle of ancient trees, whose branches intertwined to form a sort of natural canopy. The light filtering through the leaves created intricate patterns on the ground, almost forming words and symbols that I couldn't decipher. "Rowena," Tobias began, his voice resonating with an authority I hadn't noticed before. "What you saw in the lake is not an inevitable fate. It is a warning, a vision of what could happen if humanity continues on its current path." Eli nodded, adding, "But it's crucial that you understand. These visions are not immutable prophecies. They are possibilities, reflections of choices that have yet to be made." I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. On the one hand, knowing that the terrible future wasn't certain gave me hope. On the other, the responsibility of trying to prevent it felt overwhelming. "But what can I do?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm just one person. How can I change the course of all humanity?" Tobias smiled gently. "You are not alone in this mission, sister. Many others in the world of the living are receiving similar warnings. You are like beacons, meant to light the way for others." Eli continued, "The change the world needs will not come from one person or one grand action. It will come from millions of small choices made every day by ordinary people." They then began to explain to me, in detail, the nature of the warning I was to bring back. "The root of all the problems you saw," Tobias said, "is disconnection. Disconnection between people, between humanity and nature, between the actions of the present and their future consequences." Eli added, "Unbridled greed, excessive consumerism, irresponsible exploitation of natural resources. All of these are symptoms of that fundamental disconnection. I began to understand. So, the solution is to reconnect? Exactly, Tobias confirmed. Humanity needs to rediscover its interconnection with all things. Every action, every choice, has consequences that extend far beyond the immediate and the visible. Eli continued, "You must understand that you are not separate from nature, but an integral part of it. The damage you inflict on the planet, you inflict on yourselves." The message was clear, but I still felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the challenge. How can I convince people to change? How can I make them see what I've seen? Tobias placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch conveying comfort and strength. "Your task is not to convince everyone, Rowena. It's to share what you've learned, live according to that truth, and inspire others to do the same." Eli agreed. Remember, change begins with the individual. Each person who awakens to this reality becomes a catalyst for others. They then gave me specific instructions on how to share this message. Speak about the interconnection of all things, how our actions have far-reaching consequences. Emphasize the importance of compassion and empathy, not just with other humans, but with all living beings and the planet itself. Promote the idea of conscious and sustainable consumption, encouraging people to consider the impact of their consumption choices. Encourage the pursuit of knowledge and understanding, especially regarding environmental and social issues. Inspire concrete actions, no matter how small, that contribute to a more sustainable and harmonious future. Remember, Tobias said, the change the world needs won't happen overnight. It will be a gradual process, sometimes frustrating, but every step in the right direction counts. Eli added, "And never forget, Rowena, you are not alone in this mission. There are many others in the world who share this vision. Find them, unite with them, and strengthen one another." As I absorbed all of this, I felt a mixture of emotions, fear of responsibility, hope for the possibility of change, and determination to make a difference. "I'm ready," I finally said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my heart. "I will do my best to share this message and live by it." Tobias and Eli smiled, their faces radiant with pride and love. "We know you will, sister," they said in unison. "And remember, we will always be with you, guiding and supporting you, even if you cannot see or hear us." With those words, I felt a wave of strength and determination wash over me. I knew the task ahead would be difficult, but I also knew it was necessary and important. I was ready to return and share what I had learned. As I mentally prepared for the journey back, I felt a subtle change in the environment around me. The light in the celestial garden seemed to intensify, and a deep sense of peace enveloped me. It was at that moment that I received one of the most surprising and transformative revelations of my entire experience. Tobias and Eli approached, their faces radiant with a knowledge that seemed to transcend everything I had experienced until then. "Before you return, Rowena," Tobias said, his voice gentle yet powerful, "there is something else you need to understand. More than heard. A truth so deep and simple that it almost made me laugh and cry at the same time. God, the universe, the creative force, whatever name we gave it, was incredibly simpler than any religion or philosophy had ever imagined. It wasn't a supreme being sitting on a celestial throne, nor an impersonal and distant force. It was, in its purest essence, connection. God was the fundamental interconnection of all things. It was the invisible fabric that united every atom, every thought, every moment in time. It was the cosmic dance of energy and consciousness that permeated all existence. You humans, Tobias explained, have a tendency to complicate what is essentially simple. You create elaborate rituals, complex doctrines, religious hierarchies, all in an attempt to understand and draw closer to the divine. Eli continued, "But the truth is that the divine is everywhere, in every moment. It is in the air you breathe, in the people you meet, in the thoughts you think." I then understood that all the separation we perceived in the physical world was an illusion. In the deepest reality, everything was connected. Everything was one. Every action, every thought, every word reverberated through this cosmic web of interconnection, affecting the whole in ways we could barely begin to comprehend. That's why, Tobias said, love and compassion are so powerful. When you love, when you care, you are tuning into the fundamental frequency of the universe. Eli added, and that's why hate, greed, and fear cause so much harm. They are dissonant with the essential nature of reality. This revelation hit me with overwhelming force. I realized that all religions, all spiritual traditions, were, in their own way, trying to express this simple but profound truth. All practices of meditation, prayer, and contemplation were, in essence, attempts to tune into this fundamental interconnection. But if it's so simple, I asked, why does it seem so difficult for us humans to live by this truth? Tobias smiled gently. And because you are immersed in the physical world, with all its apparent separations and limitations, it's easy to get lost in the illusion of individuality and forget the underlying unity. Moreover, Eli added, the free will you possess allows you to choose whether or not to align with this truth. It's a journey of constant discovery and choice. I then understood that my mission wasn't just to warn of the potential dangers of the future, but also to share this deep understanding of the nature of reality. It was about helping people rediscover their essential connection to everything that exists. Remember, Rowena, Tobias said, every act of kindness, every moment of conscious connection, every choice aligned with this truth contributes to the harmony of the whole. Eli concluded, you don't need to convince people with arguments or doctrines. Live this truth. Radiate this understanding through your actions and your being, and you will become a beacon for others. As I absorbed this revelation, I felt a deep peace settle within me. The complexity of the world, with all its challenges and conflicts, seemed to dissolve in the face of this simple and powerful truth. I knew that, no matter what happened when I returned, this understanding would be my anchor and guiding light. With my heart full of new insights and a renewed sense of purpose, I found myself at the moment I knew would eventually come, the choice between staying in this celestial realm or returning to the world of the living. Tobias and Eli led me to a part of the garden I hadn't seen before. It was a circular clearing, surrounded by trees whose leaves glowed with their own light, gently pulsing in a rhythm that resembled a heartbeat. In the center of the clearing, there were two paths. One led to a bright and welcoming light, so intense I could barely look directly at it. The other path seemed to fade gradually, becoming more and more nebulous until it disappeared completely. We've reached the moment of choice, sister, Tobias said, his voice gentle but serious. Eli continued, the path of light leads deeper into this realm. If you choose to follow it, you will leave your earthly life behind and join us permanently. I looked at the luminous path, feeling its irresistible pull. The peace, love, and understanding I had experienced here were beyond anything I had ever known. The idea of fully immersing myself in this elevated existence was incredibly tempting. And the other path? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The nebulous path leads back to your physical body, to your life on earth, Tobias replied. If you choose to follow it, you will take with you the memories and teachings you've received here, but you will return to the limitations and challenges of the material world. I remained silent for a moment, pondering. The choice seemed obvious at first glance. Why would I choose to return to a world full of pain, conflict, and uncertainty when I could remain in this paradise of love and understanding? But then, I remembered the visions I had witnessed, the warnings about humanity's future. I remembered the mission I had been entrusted with, the responsibility to share what I had learned. Your choice must be based on what feels right for you. Tobias added, there is no wrong choice here, Rowena. Either path you choose will have its purpose and beauty. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. On one side, the call of the divine, the promise of eternal peace and understanding. On the other, the world I knew, with all its imperfections but also with all its possibilities. I thought of my family, my friends, my students. I thought of the people I hadn't met yet, the lives I could touch if I returned. I thought of the difference I could make, no matter how small, with the knowledge I now possessed. I opened my eyes, my decision made. I need to go back, I said, my voice trembling slightly but firm in its resolution. Tobias and Eli smiled, their faces radiant with pride and understanding. We knew this would be your choice, Eli said. Your heart has always been that of a guardian, a protector. Tobias stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. Remember, Rowena, even though we cannot be with you physically, we will always be present. In moments of doubt or fear, seek the stillness within, and you will find us there. I nodded, feeling a mixture of determination and apprehension. What will it be like to return? I asked, glancing at the nebulous path. It will be like waking from a dream, Eli explained. You will remember everything you've experienced here, but the memories may feel distant, as if seen through a veil. But the knowledge, the understanding you've gained, Tobias added, will stay with you. Maybe not in clear words, but as a deep certainty in your heart. I took a deep breath, preparing myself to take the first step toward the path back. Before I could, though, Tobias and Eli embraced me lovingly. Go with our blessing and our love, sister, they said in unison. Always remember who you are and why you chose to return. With tears in my eyes and a heart full of love and purpose, I took the first step toward the nebulous path. As I moved forward, I felt the world around me begin to dissolve. The celestial colors gave way to a bright white, and then darkness. The first thing I felt upon returning was pain, a sharp, throbbing pain that seemed to course through every fiber of my body. Slowly, I began to become aware of my surroundings. The smell of ozone in the air, the distant sound of sirens approaching, the rough sensation of concrete beneath my back. I opened my eyes with difficulty, blinking against the daylight that seemed blinding after the softness of the celestial realm. I was back on the steps of my porch, exactly where the lightning had struck me. My body ached, and I could still feel the residual tingling of electricity in my limbs. As paramedics rushed around me, checking my vital signs and preparing me for transport, my mind struggled to process everything that had happened. The memories of my experience in the beyond seemed to fade quickly, like a dream upon waking. But the knowledge, the deep understanding I had gained, remained with me. In the days and weeks that followed, as I recovered in the hospital, I reflected a great deal on my experience and the mission I had been given. The physical marks left by the lightning on my body were a constant reminder of the extraordinary journey I had made. I realized that my task would not be easy. How could I explain to people what I had experienced? How could I convey the urgency of the necessary change without sounding like a madwoman or a religious fanatic? I decided to start slowly. As I recovered, I began to make small changes in my own life. I adopted a more sustainable lifestyle, reducing my consumption and being more mindful of my impact on the environment. I began practicing daily meditation, seeking to reconnect with that sense of unity I had experienced in the beyond. Gradually, I started sharing my story with those close to me, family, friends, colleagues. Some reacted with skepticism, others with fascination. But what surprised me was how many people resonated with the central message of interconnection and responsibility. I returned to teaching, but now with a new perspective. I incorporated themes of sustainability, ethics, and interconnection into my literature classes. I encouraged my students to think critically about their place in the world and their impact on the lives of others and the planet. I began writing about my experience and the insights I had gained. At first, it was just personal notes, but eventually, it evolved into articles and finally miming a book. Through writing, I found a way to articulate the complex truths I had learned in a way that people could understand and relate to. I participated in conferences and lectures, sharing my story and the message of urgency for change. It wasn't always easy. I faced skepticism, ridicule, and even hostility from some. But I also found people who were hungry for a new perspective, for a sense of purpose and connection. Over time, I realized that my mission wasn't to convert the entire world to my vision. It was to plant seeds. Every person who stopped to reflect on their choices, every individual who began to see their connection to others and to the planet, was a victory. I formed partnerships with environmental and humanitarian organizations, using my voice to amplify their messages. I worked with scientists and spiritual leaders, seeking bridges between science and spirituality, showing how both pointed to the same fundamental truth of interconnection. There were moments of doubt and discouragement, moments when world events seemed to confirm the dark visions I had witnessed. But in those moments, I remembered the words of Tobias and Eli. I sought the stillness within and found strength and guidance. As the years passed, I began to see changes, small at first, almost imperceptible, but gradually gaining momentum. More people started to wake up to the reality of our interconnection. Global movements for environmental and social justice gained strength. Technological innovations aimed at sustainability began to emerge at a rapid pace. I can't say it was easy. There were setbacks, moments of crisis that seemed to confirm the worst of my visions. But there were also surprising breakthroughs, moments of global cooperation that filled me with hope. Now, years after my near-death experience, I look back and see how much I've changed and how much the world has changed. The mission I was given in that celestial garden has shaped every aspect of my life. It has become my purpose, my reason for being. I know there is still much work to be done. The future I saw in the celestial lake is still a possibility, a warning of what could happen if we don't change course. But now I know I am not alone in this mission. There are millions of people around the world working toward a better future, each in their own way. When I look into people's eyes, my students, my readers, strangers on the street, I see an awakening, a growing understanding that we are all part of something greater, all connected in a cosmic web of existence. I don't know what the future holds. I can't guarantee we'll avoid all the disasters I saw in that vision. But I know that every choice we make, every act of kindness and compassion, every effort to live in harmony with the planet and with each other makes a difference. My near-death experience taught me that life is precious, that every moment is an opportunity to make a difference. It showed me that love, compassion, and connection are the most powerful forces in the universe. And so, I continue my journey. I continue sharing my story, planting seeds of change where I can. I know it may sometimes seem like an impossible task to change the course of all humanity. But I remember what Tobias and Eli told me. We are not alone in this mission. Each of us has the power to make a difference. Every choice, every action, every word of kindness reverberates through the cosmic web of existence, affecting the whole in ways we can barely imagine. And so, I end my story with an invitation and a challenge to all who hear or read it. Look around you. See the beauty and interconnectedness of all things. Understand that your actions matter, that you are part of something greater. The future is not set in stone. It is in our hands, in our daily choices. Together, we can create a world of compassion, sustainability, and harmony. A world that honors our deep connection to all life. This is my story. This is my mission. And I invite you to join me on this journey to a better future. Because, in the end, we are all one, and together, we can make a difference. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please leave a like, comment with your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to more people. See you next time.